Welcome to EduPlanet 21's 10-Minute Tuesdays, a series of conversations with experts in education. We are speaking with authors of our PLUS learning pathways to provide educators with actionable information in bite-sized pieces. My name is Claire Coop-Scott, and I'm with the content team at EduPlanet 21. Today, I am joined once again by Allison Zmuda, an education consultant and author of Students at the Center, Personalized Learning and Habits in Mind, as well as Bena Kallick, co-author of the same book, co-director of the Institute for Habits of Mind, and chief strategic advisor at EduPlanet 21. Welcome back to our conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So last time we were together, we focused kind of overall on personalized learning and definitions. And this time I'd like to focus a little bit on elementary school and elementary teachers and students. One of the things I know I personally have heard from elementary teachers is that they do guided reading groups, that they do leveled math groups, so they feel they already are personalizing learning. So talk about how personalized learning is different than those two things or other things that elementary teachers already do naturally.
I would rather say it's not different. It's simply a matter of intention. So if you're doing guided reading and you have a guided reading group, then the question is, what kinds of books are they reading? Who's choosing the books? How do they actually begin to think about which books are of greatest interest? How does the teacher really facilitate a whole conversation in guided reading around the book itself and what connections you make to it, what associations? So I would say that a lot of the practices that teachers are doing, guided reading, math workshop, readers and writers workshop, all lend themselves very, very well to personalizing, as long as the fundamental foundation of it is that it's all about knowing the kids well enough to help them and to have them know each other well enough to be able to have relationships as they're building their deeper understanding and becoming better readers, writers, and mathematicians.
So another marker is, what is the sign of success if I'm engaged in a guided reading experience? And if the success is they finished the text or they scored well on some kind of small test or assessment, those are small indicators, but the broader issue is the quality and the depth of the reading experience. So it really goes back to, how am I continuing to grow students' capacity to think deeply with text, to bring context to it, to make sense from it. Same thing when it comes to leveled math groups. The idea is that if success is defined based on how you're moving through the topics from one to another, as opposed to thinking about the legacy of how I'm growing as a mathematician. So I think another small part of that is the ability for an elementary school teacher to begin to identify and have students help co-create with you. What are the artifacts that I feel most proud of as I'm engaged in, whether it's a leveled math group or whether it's a guided reading group? What are the challenges that I face? How am I working through those challenges? To what extent am I still getting stuck? And so that level of collection of artifacts, but regular reflection, continues to grow the idea that it's not just succeeding one chunk at a time, one text at a time, but growing their capacity as readers, writers, and mathematicians.
So what role do you think that technology plays in personalizing learning?
So I think one area that we've seen real power in personalizing learning is around the idea of digital portfolios. So the ability to identify and archive work is fundamentally important. And there are lots of different platforms, whether they're free or it costs a little bit of money, to actually create some kind of structure or system. So I think the interesting part is that, yes, you can have a faster way of moving through the collection of stuff, but at the same time, you haven't quite started personalizing yet. Because at the heart of personalizing is the opportunity to engage in self-discovery. So how can I actually begin to step back and examine with a critical eye my own work, my own thinking, and give voice to that as part of a reflection they're writing. So the artifacts are as powerful to study as some of the texts they are reading in their guided reading groups.
I think what we're suggesting is everything needs to be in the service of students really becoming more integrated and more kind of rich as learners. That's where technology really plays its biggest role.
So, so do you think you could share a story with us, a school that you've worked with that has transformed learning for students?
So one school in particular, and especially this is the school that we're going to be visiting tomorrow. So this is an elementary school that focuses on 2 programs before we showed up to the party. First is The Leader in Me by Stephen Covey, where you're really trying to grow students' capacity as leaders, not only in their classroom and their school, but also in their local community. And the second aspect is project-based learning as a structure or a frame to continue to establish rich projects. So when you're thinking about adding personalizing to the mix, it does continue to create this level of clarity that yes, students are at the center. And that means that we really need to think hard about how can we potentially at the school level, especially this is a fabulous principal that we've been working with, where her philosophy is to just say yes to questions that students come to her with. So just say yes to a group of students who wanted to create a gratitude club to be able to spread love and joy and thanks throughout their school community. Or just say yes to somebody that wanted to create a dance-a-thon to be able to help somebody that was in need. So the intention of that particular school, the entire culture started to become hardwired and transformed because they started to believe in the power of the student voice and their capacity to do something with their experience. And that level of joy and ownership that the kids were feeling actually was quite contagious.
That's fantastic. So before we wrap up today, I'm just wondering if you have a tip that you could share with our elementary teachers out there of something that they could do to enhance the practices in their classroom or to learn more themselves.
Yeah, well, I think both. First, certainly, to just take a moment and take a beat and go back and ask yourself, where have you really encouraged and invited students to begin to co-create with you? Maybe it's when you're doing a simple rubric. For example, it might be that you're saying, well, what does it look like and what does it sound like when we're all going to be listening well to one another in our groups today? So that's a way to take an opportunity to say, before I suggest how you should behave, let's co-create some rules together, some ground rules, some norms. Let's begin to think about it. So I would say co-creation often is much easier than people realize. It's inviting kids to join you in the design work rather than being the one who's up till midnight doing the designing. And what I would say is that another great way to begin to think about it is to actually go to, since we're being interviewed by EduPlanet, go to our learning path, where we actually give a number of examples and videos that show classrooms where they are personalized with some annotations so that you can begin to see what distinguishes them, what makes them look like and behave like personalized learning classrooms. And finally, we have an article that we've written where we look at the 4 filters that Allison has mentioned. And we'll be sending that to you so that you can have it available to the people who are watching if you would like.
That sounds terrific. Well, thank you, Bena and Allison, for joining me today. And I look forward to our next conversation when we focus on the secondary classroom.